a galaxy-renowned military academy, where only the strongest survive. It's a week-long trial that has broken every alien species, until a single human, barely older than a teenager, walks in. The challenge is impossible. But after just 1 hour he finishes what no one else could in days. As the elite alien drill sergeants watch in shock, a deadly question looms. How could a Deathworlder, a species they deemed inferior, turn their greatest test into a joke? And what happens when the rest of the galaxy realizes what humanity is capable of? The shuttle hissed as it touched down on the obsidian surface of Corax 7, the most unforgiving training ground in the galaxy. Inside the cabin, dozens of recruits, each from a different alien species, murmured nervously. Alex Monroe, the sole human among them, leaned back in his seat, idly flipping a coin as though he were waiting for a bus rather than being delivered to the galaxy's most brutal military academy. Commander Kvarn watched from the observation platform, his 4 black eyes narrowing as he studied the new arrivals. His gaze lingered on Alex, the unassuming Deathworlder in a plain uniform. Kvarn had seen recruits from high-gravity worlds, species with triple hearts and unbreakable exoskeletons, but this human? He looked fragile, soft. A mistake, Kvarn thought as his mandibles clicked in distaste. Let's see how long he lasts, the commander muttered to his adjutant. I'll have his resignation by the end of the day. The recruits filed out of the shuttle, squinting against the twin suns blazing overhead. Alex followed at the back, his boots crunching on the sharp crystalline ground. Around him, towering reptilians and sleek, insectoid species stretched, their alien bodies adjusting to the intense heat and gravity. Alex gave a low whistle. Nice place you've got here, he said to no one in particular, his easygoing tone drawing a few glances. Attention. Kvarn's voice boomed, silencing the murmurs. The recruits snapped into line, their forms awkward and uneven. Welcome to the intergalactic training grounds. I am Commander Kvarn, and I will break you before I build you into something worthy of galactic service. He stalked down the line, his sharp gaze slicing through the recruits. This is not your homeworld. There is no room for weakness here. Fail and you will be sent back in disgrace, or in pieces. When Kvarn reached Alex he stopped. The human was leaning slightly, his stance casual, his expression unreadable. Kvarn's mandibles flared. And you must be the Deathworlder. Alex's lips curled into a faint smirk. That's me. Kvarn's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. Do you think your reputation will carry you here, human? That your planet's brutish gravity and predatory species will make you special? He leaned closer, his breath hot and acrid. You will fall like all the others who thought they were exceptional. Alex flipped the coin in his hand, catching it without looking. We'll see, won't we? A ripple of tension passed through the recruits. The defiance was palpable, almost reckless, but Alex's tone wasn't aggressive, it was confident, as if he already knew how the story would end. Kvarn straightened, his claws clicking against the hard surface. Very well, Cadet Monroe. You've just volunteered to lead the first trial. The Obsidian Gauntlet begins in 30 minutes. Pray your bravado lasts longer. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. The Obsidian Gauntlet was infamous across the galaxy, a grueling trial of endurance, intellect, and survival that many species couldn't complete in the full week allotted. Alex, apparently unbothered, slipped the coin into his pocket and adjusted his jacket. 30 minutes later, the recruits stood at the edge of the course, staring at a jagged landscape of shifting platforms, energy fields, and pits of molten crystal. The air crackled with static and alien recruits fidgeted nervously, whispering among themselves. Alex stretched his arms, rolling his neck with a faint grin. Looks fun, he said, earning incredulous stares from his fellow cadets. Kvarn's voice crackled through the intercom. The gauntlet begins now. Survive, or don't. A klaxon blared. The recruits hesitated, but Alex was already moving, sprinting toward the first obstacle with the casual precision of someone who had nothing to prove, and everything to gain. By the time the others took their first steps, Alex was already halfway up the first incline, his pace steady, his movements efficient. In the control room, Kvarn stared at the monitor, his mandibles tightening. Interesting, he murmured, though his tone was anything but pleased. As Alex reached the top of the incline and prepared to leap to the next platform, he glanced back at the struggling recruits and smirked. Piece of cake, he muttered before vanishing into the labyrinth ahead. Kvarn leaned forward in his chair, his 4 black eyes narrowing. For the first time in decades, he felt something he hadn't expected from a human recruit. The Obsidian Gauntlet was never meant to be completed, not in one piece. Its towering platforms shifted without warning, energy fields flickered with deadly arcs of plasma, and traps were disguised as safe paths. Designed by the galaxy's most sadistic tacticians, the course tested not just physical endurance but mental acuity, demanding quick decisions and even quicker reflexes. It was said that recruits who survived it weren't trained, they were forged. Alex Monroe stood at the edge of the first gap, a gaping chasm that revealed a molten river below. Around him, alien cadets hesitated, their hesitation palpable as they calculated the risks. The reptilian Corthans flexed their clawed limbs, built for climbing but ill-suited for the unstable platforms. The sleek acrinids clicked nervously, their chitinous legs designed for speed but not balance. Alex simply crouched, studying the movement of the platforms. "Your hesitation will kill you," Kvarna's voice growled through the intercom, the contempt in his tone cutting through the recruits like a blade. "Or perhaps it's the molten river beneath your feet that will." Alex glanced up at the observation tower, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Nice motivational speech," he muttered. Without waiting, he jumped, his boots landing squarely on the first platform as it lurched to the side. Gasps rippled through the group behind him. The human moved with an almost casual precision, adjusting to the platform's sudden shifts as if it were second nature. The acrinids exchanged nervous clicks before one attempted the leap, their leg catching on the edge. The recruit scrambled to recover, narrowly avoiding a fall into the molten abyss. Alex didn't stop. His movements were fluid, instinctive, as though the platform's rhythm were a song only he could hear. Within minutes, he'd cleared the first segment and was already scaling a jagged wall leading to the next section. In the control room, Kvarn leaned forward, his mandibles twitching. How is he moving so quickly? His adjutant, a hulking Krexian with a body of overlapping plates, studied the monitor. "Perhaps the Deathworlder's reflexes are simply that advanced, Commander?" Kvarn snorted. "Reflexes mean nothing if he can't handle what comes next. Engage the environmental modifiers. Let's see how he fares when the wind turns against him." Back on the course, Alex reached the summit of the wall just as a sharp gust of wind slammed into him. He instinctively dropped to a crouch, gripping the edge of the platform. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on the jagged surface beneath his hands. Around him, the sounds of alien recruits struggling against the sudden environmental shift filled the air. "Lovely," Alex muttered, glancing over his shoulder. The others were still on the first leg of the course, some clinging to platforms while others shouted instructions to their teammates. "You're going to break your neck," a voice called. Alex turned to see a Corthan recruit struggling on a swinging rope. "Probably not today," Alex called back. He adjusted his footing and launched himself onto the next platform, the icy surface threatening to send him sliding into the abyss. His boots held and he let out a breath. All right, next up. Ahead of him was a series of vertical pillars, each spaced just far enough apart to require a precise leap. Alex studied them for a moment, calculating. "Cadet Monroe," Kvarna's voice crackled over the intercom, sharp and mocking. "I hope you're enjoying yourself. These pillars have taken down every top recruit from every species for the last 3 years. Care to set a precedent?" Alex grinned, the challenge sparking something in him. "I don't know, Commander. Looks like my kind of game." With that, he sprinted forward, each leap perfectly timed, his boots barely brushing the edges before launching to the next. The pillars shifted randomly, their tops spinning unpredictably, but Alex adjusted on the fly, his body moving as if it had rehearsed this 1,000 times. In the control room, Kvarna's claws dug into the console. "Impossible," he hissed. Alex landed on the final pillar, turning back to give the observation tower a quick salute before leaping to the solid ground of the next checkpoint. The holographic timer above the course flashed his time, and murmurs spread through the alien recruits still struggling in the early sections. "Piece of cake," Alex said under his breath, wiping the frost from his sleeves. As he moved forward, the faint sound of Kvarna's voice carried over the intercom. "Increased difficulty to level Omega?" The smirk faded from Alex's face as he stared at the labyrinthine nightmare ahead. Energy walls shifted unpredictably, automated drones armed with plasma cannons floated in erratic patterns, and the final stretch was nothing more than a series of razor-thin beams suspended over a bottomless pit. Alex cracked his neck and muttered, "All right. Let's see what you've got." Above, Kvarn watched, equal parts infuriated and intrigued. This human was more than he had expected. Much more. Alex Monroe crouched behind a jagged wall of obsidian, sweat beading on his forehead. Ahead of him, plasma drones hovered in unpredictable patterns, their scanners sweeping the area. Behind him, the sound of alien recruits struggling to catch up echoed faintly across the course. The obstacle ahead wasn't just a test of endurance or brute strength, It demanded something far rarer: adaptability. From his perch in the observation room, Commander Kaz'thor folded his arms, his mandibles twitching as he watched the humans' every move. "Let's see how the Deathworlder handles this," he muttered to his adjutant. Alex peeked around the edge, studying the drone's movements. They were fast, too fast to outrun, and their plasma turrets tracked even the slightest motion. He pulled a small, palm-sized holographic display from his pocket, its cracked screen flickering as it analyzed the drone's patterns. "All right, let's see what makes you tick," Alex muttered, his fingers tapping rapidly. Within seconds he identified a slight delay in the drone's targeting systems, a gap of just 0.3 seconds between their scans. "Not perfect," he whispered to himself, "but it'll do." The alien recruits, still navigating the earlier sections, had stopped to watch. Whispers rippled through the group as they observed the human crouching in plain view of the drones, seemingly unbothered by the danger. "Is he crazy?" a reptilian Kaz'thor hissed, his scaled tail lashing nervously. "No," replied a sleek, insectoid acrinid, its mandibles clicking in thought. "He's calculating." Without warning, Alex sprinted forward. The drones immediately locked onto him, plasma turrets swiveling with lethal precision. At the last second, Alex dove, sliding under an energy beam just as the turrets fired. The plasma bolts scorched the ground where he had been, missing him by inches. Kaz'thor leaned closer to the monitor, his 4 black eyes narrowing. "He's exploiting the delay," he growled. "How did he spot it so quickly?" Alex rolled to his feet and kept moving, his movements fluid and deliberate. Each step was timed perfectly, each dodge calculated. The drones adjusted their patterns, but Alex adapted faster, weaving through their fire with an ease that defied logic. By the time he reached the end of the drone field, the alien recruits were stunned into silence. Even Kaz'thor, who had spent decades overseeing this course, found himself grudgingly impressed. "Reduce the drone's delay to 0.1 seconds, Kaz'thor ordered, his voice sharp. "Let's see how he handles perfection." In the control room, the adjutant hesitated. "Commander, that setting is—" "Do it," Kaz'thor snapped. The drones immediately recalibrated, their movements becoming faster and more precise. Alex paused at the edge of the next obstacle, realizing the change instantly. The air around him buzzed with the energy of the drone's targeting systems, and he let out a low whistle. "All right, they're learning," he muttered, a grin tugging at his lips. "Guess I'll have to pick up the pace." Instead of trying to outmaneuver the drones, Alex shifted tactics. He reached into his belt and pulled out a reflective shard of obsidian, holding it up to the nearest drone. The plasma cannon locked onto the reflection, firing at its own companion in a flash of light. "Let's even the odds," Alex said, ducking as the blast took out 2 drones at once. The recruits erupted into stunned murmurs. No one had ever used the course's environment as a weapon before, let alone against the course itself. In the observation room, Kaz'thor's mandibles flared in frustration. He's not just adapting, he's rewriting the rules of the game. By the time Alex cleared the drone field, he had dismantled half the drones and disabled the others, leaving a smoking path in his wake. He turned back to the observation tower and gave a mock salute. "Hope you're taking notes up there," he called, his voice light but carrying an edge of defiance. Kaz'thor slammed a clawed fist onto the console, his temper barely contained. "Prepare the next trial," he ordered. "Double the gravity. Disable all environmental aids. I don't care what it takes, he will fail." Alex, meanwhile, reached the next checkpoint, where the recruits had just begun to arrive. They stared at him with a mix of awe and suspicion, their own struggles with the gauntlet suddenly dwarfed by his performance. "You're insane," one recruit muttered, a tall, multi-limbed Tarsican whose carapace glistened with sweat. "Maybe," Alex replied with a grin, tossing the obsidian shard aside. "But insane works." The klaxon blared again, signaling the start of the next phase. The ground beneath them rumbled as the course shifted, the gravity amplifiers kicking in with a deep hum. Alex stretched his arms, rolling his shoulders. "All right," he said, his tone almost casual. "Let's see what they've got next." Behind him, Kaz'thor watched with a growing sense of unease. The human wasn't just surviving the gauntlet, he was thriving in it. And that, Kaz'thor realized, made him more dangerous than any recruit the Academy had ever seen. The air shimmered as the recruits were transported into the simulation chamber. The sleek metallic walls gave way to a vast holographic battlefield, a hyper-realistic projection designed to test their skills under the most grueling conditions. The terrain stretched endlessly, a mix of jagged mountains, dense forests and barren wastelands riddled with traps. Above them, A blood-red sky churned with holographic storm clouds. Alex Monroe squinted at the landscape, adjusting to the sudden shift. Around him, the recruits murmured nervously, their figures flickering as the simulation calibrated to their physical and cognitive profiles. Each cadet was equipped with a holographic overlay displaying vitals and their remaining lives, a painfully finite resource in this brutal exercise. Kvarna's voice boomed over the battlefield, crisp and unyielding. Welcome to the final trial, cadets. This simulation is not just about survival, it is about leadership, strategy, and sacrifice. You will be divided into teams. Your goal: eliminate opposing forces and secure the enemy's command center. Victory will require more than brute strength. It will demand cooperation. The recruits exchanged wary glances. Teamwork was often an afterthought in the gauntlet, where individual performance reigned supreme. Now their survival depended on each other. A list of names flashed on the recruits' HUDs, assigning them to teams. Alex scanned his group, a mix of species with vastly different abilities and temperaments. A hulking Korthan named Vrax sneered at him, clearly unimpressed by the human's reputation. Beside him, a wiry acrinid named Skith clicked nervously, her compound eyes darting around. Great, Alex muttered. The dream team. Vrax growled. I don't take orders from soft bloods. Good, Alex replied, his tone disarmingly calm. I'm not giving any, yet. Let's just focus on not getting vaporized in the first 10 minutes, alright? Before Vrax could retort, the simulation's countdown began. The terrain rumbled as obstacles emerged. Energy shields, automated turrets, and holographic enemy troops. Go, Kvarn barked, and the battlefield erupted into chaos. Alex's team scattered, their initial movements uncoordinated. Skith darted toward a ridge for high ground, her nimble legs carrying her swiftly over the uneven terrain. Vrax charged forward, his claws ready to tear through anything in his path. Alex hung back, observing. It took less than 5 minutes for the first casualty. A recruit from another team was struck by a plasma round, their holographic body dissolving in a burst of light. The simulation spared no details, simulating the screams, the heat of the blast, the panic that followed. Focus, Alex called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Don't just run blind. They're watching for that. Skith chirped in agreement, scuttling back toward him. What's the plan, human? Or do you even have one? Alex grinned. Always. First, we figure out what kind of enemy we're up against. As if on cue, a squad of holographic soldiers crested the ridge, their energy weapons glowing ominously. Alex dropped to a crouch, motioning for his team to take cover. All right, he said, his voice calm. Vrax, you're the tank. Draw their fire. Skith flanked them. I'll cover the middle. Vrax hesitated, his disdain for Alex evident. Why should I listen to you? Alex didn't flinch. Because if you don't, they'll turn you into Korthan barbecue and I'll still be standing. Your call. A plasma bolt slammed into the ground near Vrax's feet, and he snarled. Fine. But if this fails, I'll tear you apart myself. Deal? Alex said, already moving. Vrax charged, his thick hide absorbing the brunt of the enemy fire. Skith darted along the ridge, her speed making her nearly invisible to the enemy's targeting systems. Alex aimed for the exposed soldiers, his holographic rifle calibrated for precision. The skirmish was over in minutes. Alex's team eliminated the enemy squad with minimal damage, but the real challenge was just beginning. In the control room, Kvarn watched intently. He's using them like pieces on a board, he murmured, half impressed. But let's see how he handles reinforcements. The battlefield shifted again, a new wave of enemies materializing from the horizon. This time they were accompanied by drones and automated turrets. Alex's team regrouped, their earlier tension replaced by cautious respect. What now? Skith asked, her mandibles clicking nervously. Alex scanned the area, his mind racing. We lure them into the forest. The trees will block the drones and we can use the terrain to split their forces. Vrax grunted. Sounds risky. Risky's better than dead, Alex shot back. They moved swiftly, Alex leading them into the dense forest. The holographic enemies followed, their formations breaking as the thick trees disrupted their sensors. Alex and his team struck with precision, exploiting every advantage. In the control room, Kvarna's mandibles clicked in frustration. He's dismantling the simulation's algorithms, he said, his tone laced with disbelief. This isn't strategy, it's instinct. By the time the team reached the edge of the forest, they had reduced the enemy forces to nearly nothing. Alex looked at his exhausted teammates and grinned. See? Piece of cake, he said, but his tone carried an edge of tension. He knew Kvarn wouldn't let this go unanswered. Above them, the sky darkened, and the ground trembled as the simulation prepared its final challenge. Alex tightened his grip on his weapon, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Stay sharp," he said quietly. "The real fun's just starting." The ground trembled violently, forcing Alex and his team to brace themselves against the nearest tree. Above them, the blood-red sky churned with dark storm clouds, the simulation's final challenge taking shape. From the horizon, an ominous mechanical hum grew louder, and shapes began to emerge. Massive war machines armed with plasma cannons, flanked by aerial drones and infantry squads. Kvarn's voice echoed across the battlefield, sharp and unrelenting. "This is the Omega Protocol, cadets. No recruit has ever survived this phase. Consider it a reminder of your insignificance." Alex glanced at the others. Vrax's claws were digging into the ground, his breathing heavy but steady. Skith's compound eyes darted nervously, scanning for threats. The others on their team, including a silent, pale-skinned Dalvin and a squat, armored Renaxian, looked equally on edge. "Well," Alex said, breaking the silence, "it's nice to know they think so highly of us. Are you always this flippant when facing certain death?" Skith hissed. Alex shrugged. "Keeps the blood pressure down." The first wave of enemy drones descended, their plasma cannons lighting up the forest with bursts of deadly fire. The recruits scattered, diving for cover as trees splintered and the ground erupted around them. "Focus fire on the drones," Alex shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If we take them down, we'll have some breathing room." Vrax roared in agreement, tearing a drone out of the air with his claws and hurling it into another, the resulting explosion lighting up the darkened sky. Skith darted through the debris, her precision strikes disabling two more. Alex crouched behind a fallen tree, his rifle trained on a distant drone. His aim was steady, his mind calculating trajectories and timing. He pulled the trigger and the drone exploded in a shower of sparks. "Clear," he called out as the last drone fell. The momentary reprieve was shattered as one of the war machines fired its main cannon. The blast tore through the forest, sending recruits flying. Alex hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. Kvarn watched from the control room, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "Let's see how long they last without their precious cover." Alex staggered to his feet, coughing as smoke filled the air. His HUD flashed red, indicating critical damage to his team's overall score. He scanned the battlefield, his mind racing. "We can't fight them head-on," Alex said, pulling his team into a huddle. "We don't have the firepower." "Then what do you suggest?" Vrax growled, his frustration evident. Alex's eyes narrowed. "We make them fight themselves?" The recruits exchanged uncertain glances, but Alex was already moving. He sprinted toward the wreckage of a fallen drone, prying open its control panel with his knife. The circuitry sparked as he worked, his fingers moving with practiced precision. "What are you doing?" Skith asked, skittering up beside him. "Reprogramming," Alex replied, not looking up. "If I can override their targeting system, I can turn those war machines against each other." "That's insane," she said, but there was a note of admiration in her voice. "Insane works," Alex shot back, a grin flashing across his face. Minutes later, the drone systems rebooted, its lights flickering to life. Alex stepped back, holding his breath as it hovered uncertainly, its cannons swiveling. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it fired, straight into the nearest war machine. The explosion rocked the battlefield and Alex whooped. "That's what I'm talking about." Kvarn leaned forward in his chair, his claws digging into the console. "Impossible," he hissed. How did he bypass the encryption so quickly? The battlefield descended into chaos as the reprogrammed drone continued its assault. Alex's team used the distraction to move, slipping past the war machines and heading toward the simulated command center. "Keep moving," Alex shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of explosions. They reached the edge of the command center, a massive structure surrounded by energy shields and automated turrets. Alex knelt behind a boulder, scanning the defenses. "This is it," he said. "We take out the command center, we win." "And how exactly do we do that?" Vrax demanded. Alex grinned. "With a little creativity." He quickly outlined a plan, assigning roles to each team member. Vrax and Skith exchanged skeptical looks but nodded. The final assault was a blur of precision and chaos. Vrax charged the front lines, drawing fire while Skith used her speed to disable key turrets. Alex slipped through a breach in the shields, his movements deliberate and calculated. Inside the command center, Alex found the control panel. His fingers flew across the interface, bypassing layers of security. The system fought back, but Alex adapted, finding weaknesses and exploiting them. Kvarn watched in disbelief as the command center's defenses collapsed. "He's not just surviving the simulation," he muttered. "He's rewriting it." With a final keystroke, Alex triggered the command center's self-destruct sequence. The structure began to collapse, and Alex sprinted out just as the simulation dissolved around him. The recruits reappeared in the training grounds, panting and battered but alive. Alex turned to Kvarn, his grin unapologetic. "Piece of cake." For a moment, Kvarn said nothing. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he clapped, once, twice, the sound echoing across the room. "Well done, Cadet Monroe," he said, though his tone carried a note of warning. "But know this, victory is only the beginning." Alex met his gaze, unflinching. "Good," he said. "Because I'm just getting started." The recruits stood in silence, their holographic gear dissolving as the simulation faded away. The battlefield, the war machines, the chaos, it was gone, leaving only the cold, sterile expanse of the training grounds. Alex Monroe stood among them, dusting off his uniform like he'd just finished a casual workout rather than dismantling the galaxy's most brutal trial. High above in the observation deck, Commander Kvarn surveyed the recruits, his 4 black eyes fixed on the human. His mandibles twitched in a mix of frustration and intrigue. Alex had done more than survive. He'd conquered the simulation, rewriting its rules and exposing flaws no one else had ever noticed. Kvarn activated the intercom. "Cadets, you have completed the gauntlet. Some of you exceeded expectations. Most of you barely survived. And one," his gaze locked onto Alex, "forced us to reconsider the very fabric of this program." The recruits turned toward Alex, their expressions a mixture of awe, resentment, and curiosity. Skith skittered closer, her mandibles clicking. "You really don't know how to do anything quietly, do you?" Alex smirked. "Not my style." Kvarn descended from the observation deck, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the group. The recruits stiffened as he approached Alex, who stood his ground, his relaxed demeanor unchanged. "Cadet Monroe," Kvarn began, his voice sharp, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" Alex shrugged. "Finished the course? Saved a few lives? Gave your drones some much-needed upgrades?" The adjutant beside Kvarn stiffened, but the commander raised a clawed hand, silencing him. "You didn't just finish the course," Kvarn said. "You dismantled it. Every test, every algorithm, every obstacle, rendered irrelevant by your methods." Alex's smirk widened. "Well, maybe the course wasn't as perfect as you thought." A tense silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of machinery in the background. The recruits held their breath, waiting for Kvarn's reaction. Finally, the commander let out a low, rumbling chuckle. "Typical Deathworlder arrogance," he said, though his tone carried a trace of reluctant admiration. "You may have survived this, human, but out there, beyond these walls, the galaxy will not be so forgiving. Your kind's unpredictability will be both your greatest strength and your gravest weakness." Alex met Kvarn's gaze, his expression unflinching. "Good thing we're quick learners." The recruits dispersed, murmurs rippling through the group as they returned to their quarters. For most, the gauntlet was a harrowing ordeal, a test of their limits. For Alex, it was another step toward proving what humanity was capable of. Later that night, Alex sat alone in the mess hall, his tray untouched. The hum of the training grounds had quieted, replaced by the low hum of distant machinery. Skith appeared, her movements cautious, and slid into the seat across from him. "You know, they're all talking about you," she said, her compound eyes gleaming. Alex leaned back, folding his arms. "Let me guess, half of them think I cheated and the other half think I'm insane." Skith clicked in amusement. "Something like that. But most of them are wondering what it means." What means?" "That humans, Deathworlders, can do things the rest of us can't." She tilted her head. "Kvarn's right, you know. The galaxy won't take kindly to you breaking their rules." Alex shrugged. "The galaxy can adapt, or it can get out of the way." Skith's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You're not afraid, are you?" "Fear's a luxury," Alex said, his tone serious. "Earth taught us that a long time ago. You adapt, you fight, or you die. That's how it's always been for us." The doors to the mess hall hissed open and Kvarn entered, his towering frame drawing immediate attention. He approached Alex's table, his claws clicking against the floor. "Cadet Monroe," he said, his tone measured. "A word." Alex stood, following Kvarn out into the corridor. The two walked in silence for a moment before the commander stopped and turned. "Your performance today will not go unnoticed," Kvarn said. The High Council will want answers. They will scrutinize you, your species, and your methods. Let them, Alex replied. They'll find out what you already know. We don't break easy. Kvarn studied him for a long moment, his black eyes unreadable. Perhaps, he said finally. Or perhaps they will see you as a threat, a destabilizing force in a galaxy that values order. Alex grinned. Order's overrated? Kvarn's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. You've earned your place here, cadet. But your journey is far from over. The galaxy is watching now. Be ready for what comes next. I will be, Alex said, his voice steady. As Kvarn walked away, Alex stared out a nearby viewport at the endless expanse of stars. Earth was far away, but its lessons were ingrained in him, a part of his very DNA. The galaxy might not be ready for humanity, but Alex was certain of one thing. Humanity was ready for the galaxy. With a final glance at the stars, Alex turned and walked back toward his quarters, his mind already on what lay ahead. The galaxy had thrown its worst at him, and he'd beaten it. Now it was time to see what else it had to offer.